The press darlings, the press darlings, press darlings.
So welcome to the last music paper review of 1977, and it's dated December the 31st and is a record mirror with Mark Bolan on the cover, with the byline, "Bolan, will he sweep the pole?" In addition to this, there's the albums and singles of the year's best and the record mirror's own choice, and I look back on 1977, the news and the goofs they made, plus a couple of features, does Sex Sell a Record, and a day at the Pistols Record Company. This time of the year was notoriously sparse in terms of content, so it would always be filled up with reviews of the year and of prophecies of the forthcoming year going forward. So first off the charts, summing up the whole year and the most popular singles and albums of the year. While it's a depressing view, these are what were the most popular songs in the country for this period of time. Let's just do the top 5 singles. Number 1, Don't Give Up on Us by David Soul. David Soul was one half of the duo Starsky and Hutch, which was an incredibly popular American detective series on our TVs at the time. This was his solo career. Number 2 was Don't Cry For Me Argentina by Julie Covington. Number 3, When I Need You, the curly-haired or permanent Leo Sayer. Number 4, Silver Lady, yet another entry for David Soul. And number 5, Knowing Me, Knowing You by the ubiquitous ABBA, who were pretty dominant in the charts over the last 2 years. Over down below to the albums, a similar state of affairs. Number 1, Arrival by ABBA. Number 2, a compilation album, 20 Golden Greats by The Shadows. Number 3, 20 Golden Greats by Diana Ross and the Supremes. Number 4, A Star Is Born soundtrack. And number 5, Fleetwood Mac and Rumours. What's perhaps more reassuring to note in here is a smattering of punk and new wave records making an appearance that include The Stranglers with Rattus Novegicus and No More Heroes. We've got Bob Marley in there with Exodus. We've obviously got the Sex Pistols with Nevermind the Bollocks. We've got the Jam and we've got the Clash. And down here, right at number 86, we've got New Wave by Various, which was on the Vertigo label. A very, very popular album, which I and many others would have picked up at Woolworths for a very, very cheap price. It's the one with the red cover and Derek Gibbs of the Satellite spitting beer on the front, and would feature bands like the Ramones, the Runaways, Dead Boys, Damned, Boomtown Rats, and the Skyhooks and Little Bob's Story. Record Mirror always led with their gossip column, which was by Juicy Lucy. This piece, again, at the end of the year, is pretty much a meaningless piece, but let's just grab a few of the awards and quotes here from it. Over here, and for those with truly perverse interests, the 2 filthiest events. First, the non-exciting drones gathered the press at a seedy, grimy massage parlour to promote their album. Nobody came. On to some of the awards then. Bum of the Year. Unsurprisingly, Anna of ABBA was a winner here. Perhaps more surprisingly was Jean-Jacques Burnel of the Stranglers. Down here, Most Overblown Groups of the Year. Wire, Susie and the Banshees. Meow. Badge of the Year. Ian Jury, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. Can't really argue with that, can we? Pose of the Year, incorporating Best Dressed Award. Not sure a Caroline Crowther is, but joint winners here were Gay Advert and again J.J. Burnell. The Derby and Joan Club Trophy. Jet Black, obvious winner there perhaps. And finally, Woman of the Year, Wayne County. So over to the page in one of their key articles of this edition, entitled, Well, What Did Happen in 1977? Jim Evans takes a look at the stories that made the headlines in the past year. 1977, another year of rock and roll. Old wave, new wave, punk. 1977 had plenty of it all. And you read it first in the Record Mirror. That's a bit arguable. Anyway, let's kick off in January. Sex Pistols shocked passengers and airline staff at Heathrow Airport as they spit, vomit and use four-letter words, later be found to be totally made up by the press. The Stranglers were banned from appearing on children's TV show Magpie. In February, Mark Bolan and his new T-Rex announced a new album, single and tour. The Clash signed to CBS. Patti Smith is hurt in a stage fall in Florida. Moving over to March, Sex Pistols sack the bass player Glenn Matlock and replace him with Sid Vicious. There are riots at the Rainbow when Iggy Pop and David Bowie appear. Weekend in March 19th, Sex Pistols sign a new recording deal with A&M. The deal is completed in a small ceremony outside Buckingham Palace to mark their new single, God Save the Queen. Johnny Rotten, real name John Joseph Linden, fined £40 for possession of amphetamines. The Clash released the debut single, White Riot. 1 week later, A&M Records issue the following statement. A&M Records wished to announce that its recording contract with the Sex Pistols has been terminated with immediate effect. The band gets $75,000 for their part of the termination of the agreement. The Damned become the first British new wave act to appear in the US with 4 nights at New York's CBGB's. Into April, the Stranglers release Ratus Norvegicus, and the Dr. Feelgood bring on board John Mayo to replace Wilco, who had left. Into May, the Clash and the Jam have over 1,000 worth of damage caused at the Rainbow in a concert. Says a theatre spokesman, there is no question of us banning the Clash or any other punk band. There's news here that the Sex Pistols signed to Virgin for an unspecified sum. A spokesman says, however other record companies might protest, they would have all liked to have signed the Sex Pistols. The end of that month sees the Jam pull out of the Clash's White Riot tour, the Stranglers having problems with their UK tour, with council objections, etc., and the Vibrators are banned from London's New Victoria Theatre. In June, MCA signed London, the band featuring John Moss on drums, who had left the Clash after being with them for a couple of months before Topper Headon, and would later join the Damned and more famously Culture Club. Degenerate Eater's drummer quits. The BBC place a radio and TV band on the Pistols' God Save the Queen, which this week jumps into the charts at number 11. A BBC spokesman describes the record as being in gross bad taste. Later that month, God Save the Queen has now sold 150,000 copies to date, despite being banned from all TV and radio exposure. The Stranglers sign a long-term deal to A&M in the US. And in the final week, Generation X get a new drummer, Mark Laff. Into July, key event here is Jackie Fox quits the Runaways and Generation X signed to Chrysalis. Come August, Sid Vicious is fined £125 for assaulting a policeman and carrying an offensive weapon. The Damned add a new guitarist, Lou. And the Vibrators quit Britain to live in Berlin, and Virgin sign XTC. The final week of August sees Elvis Presley die, and the Buzzcocks signed to United Artists. Into September, Mark Bolan also dies in a car crash. And for some reason this is news. Cherry Vanilla announces her imminent arrival here. In October, Tom Robinson releases 2468 and tours, and the Jam are planning trips to the States. DJM sign a punk band, Satan's Rats, and 999 signed to United Artists. Paul Cook of the Sex Pistols plays with the Heartbreakers. The Sex Pistols are forced to withdraw the colour sleeve of Holidays in the Sun, and Never Mind the Bollocks goes gold by the Sex Pistols. into November. The Sex Pistols are taken to court for their window display in Nottingham for Never Mind the Bollocks, and Richard Branson appearing in court when they are cleared completely of any misdoing. The Stranglers are also cleared on a drunk charge. Into December, the Rich Kids announce a tour and the fact that they are recording with Mick Ronson, and it's revealed that the Sex Pistols are to tour at last. Their first gig will be at Burnel University at Uxbridge, and it's also then confirmed the Sex Pistols are to play a children's party in Huddersfield on Christmas Day. And that was as far as it went, as the Record Mirror went to press for the last time in 1977. So over the page, a couple of interesting articles here by Sheila Prophet. The first one at the top is entitled Shawaddy Waddy and is a light-hearted review of the Pulp Fiction book Punk Rock by Richard Allen. And here's a few comments about it. For the small price of 60p, you'll find more hilarity than a whole series of the Basil Brush Show. We've picked out a selection of the passages for you to share. Punks with safety pins stuck everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Ted's on the rampage. Fanzines called Spins, where all the reporters smoke marijuana and live off bribes from record companies. What a wheeze. There's only one snag. The author, and I use the term advisedly, is not joking. I repeat, he means it seriously. Who is the author? The inside cover of the book informs us that he was also responsible for those classic novels Dragon Skins, Terrace Terrors, and that delightful work, Knuckle Girls. See his stock in trade is jumping on whatever bandwagon happens to be rolling at the time, doing a small, very small amount of research on it, and dashing off a badly written 20 chapters on the subject. The feature doesn't even have the cover of the book, but it does have this little quote here that I'll read to you. It's a bit steamy, so just caution there. Can you? She began to ask. Gasped when he did. Jerked forward to meet his demanding upward thrust grinding down. Her neck arched, head flung backwards, with chestnut hair trailing in the slopping water. Yes, you've got what it takes. Shawaddy waddy, he thought. Then all there was worth concentrating on were the thrills, which gathered pace, steam, urgency. Right, relax from that. Down below, this little feature here is called Binga Bonga Banga and is basically around a drumming tuition album called The Pulse of Time by Lloyd Ryan. And Lloyd had taught drummers such as Status Quo's John Coughlin and Phil Collins of Genesis. This little paragraph though. Any potential stars among his current pupils? I have one boy, he's in the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. He's very good. And there's a boy called Martin who's in a punk group called Puncture. It would give the punk fans a surprise to see him sitting in my studio learning to play sambas. Martin was in fact Marty Truss, the drummer of Puncture. Puncture would do the first single on the small label Small Wonder Records, entitled Mucky Pup, that would be covered by those lovable Scottish funsters, The Exploited, quite surprisingly. Over on the other side is a feature on XTC that is basically an insult to the reader's intelligence. It's based around a fetish about being dressed as a baby in your 50s, 60s, in nappies, etc., and has a couple of pictures of XTC with a dummy and a rattle drawn in cartoon style. So over we go to the album section. As we said, this was a pretty lean time for releases, but in this instance they feature a Eater the album and a review by Barry Kane. It's given a creditable 3 stars, but it's a similar review to Paul Morley's one earlier in the month in the NME. There was a time when it looked as though Eater were going to come through. A year ago they were there with the best of them, avoiding phlegm rolls and getting their name in the national hack peep shows. They were the youngest, and suddenly that began to show. They started pumping out Twilight Zone dross from behind the shield of their own label. Degenerate left, publicity nil. Nobody wanted to touch them, all washed up at 16. And heaven forbid It was time for an album. But hey, little ones, it ain't that bad. The album proves that if nothing else, a guy can have fun in a pop group. 16 songs, predictable but uncertain, blindly naive but lovable. The album is harmless but contagious, and I guess that is really what it's all about. On the other page, a massive feature really here on the people that work for Virgin Records and the promotions of the Sex Pistols, and that's its basic premise. In short, though, it's an utter rubbish piece of journalism done by John Shearlaw. And an example here, just on the captions around the photograph, reveal it all. Al, I've got nothing to say, Clark, one of the people interviewed, and fearless John Shearlaw. Right, top pick, Linda, sexy, Gamble, and Sally, sexy Cooper. There it is in all its mild sexist glory, giving you no information whatsoever. And this little piece here probably just about sums it up. This is Al Clark from Virgin Records explaining the journey that Virgin have took. In 3 years, we've moved from a Woodstock situation, he refers here to Virgin's signing of many erstwhile hippie acts, to a Trenchtown situation. He refers to Virgin's signing of many erstwhile Rasta Jamaican acts, to what can be called only a freely interacting, slightly scruffy, but totally meaningful street situation. He refers here to Virgin's recent signing of all manner of totally ridiculous, completely necessary, and universally entertaining acts. By this, I think Shearlaw means punk. What a div. So over the page we go, and there's a rather self-indulgent double page spread, which is the staff of Record Mirror giving their top singles and albums and a summary of the year according to them. It's entitled RM's Black Plastic Award of 1977. But before going into it a bit more, it's worthwhile looking back a year and seeing what one of them, Robin Smith, had to say about his predictions for 1977. He says, "The mist clears to reveal that punk rock may not be as big as we all thought. It was all over before it started, really. Despite what the papers had to say, there are very few people prepared to stick a safety pin through their ears." He sums up, so apart from a few highlights, it's going to be a pretty gloomy year. Roll on 78. Well done, Robin. Here's what they say anyway for this feature. Our top 10s weren't in any special order, so the overall records of the year were chosen on the basis of 1 point per top 10 appearance. Since there are only 9 of us, it was a closely fought race, especially in the album section where 3 groups tied for second place. But in both sections, it was clear from the start who'd be first. The Sex Pistols simply swept the board. Well done, chaps. Now let's see if you can keep it up in 78. And there they are, the ones that tied for number 2, The Clash, The Stranglers and Television. So just picking a few of these. Barry Kane, 1977, the year the Muzak died. Sheila Prophet, a year of new names, new energy, new life. Tony Blackburn ignored it, but it didn't go away. Let's hope it keeps happening in 78. Rosalind Russell. It's nearly broken my heart to leave Rod Stewart's latest album out of the list, but I don't honestly believe that Footloose and Fancy Free is his best, or can compete against the albums I've chosen, which include Nevermind the Bollocks, Boomtime Rats, The Clash, The Saints. Anyway, it takes a line down the middle where the albums are extreme examples of their kind. Not only that, I think they're landmarks in music, and for the artists in 1977. And Tim Lott, 1977 was street level, gutter snipes and anti-heroes, the best year for a decade. In 1978 comes the reaction, pop music, clean-cut teenage fun with harmonies and Lux letters in the sand. Tommy James and the Shondells rise again, a step up from bubblegum, a step sideways from new wave. The signs are all there for return of the pop star. Elvis Costello and the Jam kicking out at the 4. On their heels will follow XTC, Yachts, the Rubinos, even Nick Lowe maybe. 1978 is clean. And what of Robin Smith, the naysayer of 1977? As far as I'm concerned, the oldies still rule. His top albums were Seconds Out by Genesis, Works Volume 1 and 2 by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Going for the One, Yes, and Rumours, Fleetwood Mac. That must have been fun. Okay, so it was only a year ago, at the end of 1976, that Record Mirror, apart from slagging off punk and saying it was going to fail fast, gave then a full double-page colour calendar of various punks and punk girls in various bits of punk fashion. So it was a bit of a surprise to go into 1978 being given a calendar featuring that well-known musical icon, Humphrey Bogart, with a caption, "Here's looking at you, Blue Eyes." I don't think so, Record Mirror. Just point out one of the letters here, just for its sheer strangeness. I'm dying of incredible lust, a lust to see the naked bodies of my favourite singing heroes. So please, could you print in your fantastic magazine some Rudy pin-ups of the following dudes: David Bowie, Cliff Richard, Elvis Costello, Leo Sayer, Dennis Roussos, Barry White, thanks a lot, and Ilfracombe Devon. Thank God that sanity is restored in the feedback column. This is where people could write in and get key information about bands and recording and releases. So here's a question from Diana Corbin in the Isle of Wight about Thin Lizzy. Could you tell me how tall Phil Lynott, Scott Gorham and Brian Downey of Thin Lizzy are? The answer: Phil Lynott is 6'1". Scott Gorham 5'11". Brian Downey 5'10". What anyone would need that information, apart from checking the height when they go to fun fairs, I will never know. So on to the live section entitled Roadshows, and it's another review of the Ramones and Rezillos on tour. Onto the Rezillos. Support band for the tour are Sire's latest signing, the Rezillos. Perhaps an unwise choice for support, as they have a large enough following of their own, and for my money they damn well near blew Joey and co off the stage. Nearly that is. Credit where it's due though. The Ramones are fun. You can bop to your heart's content and have a real good time, providing you don't listen too hard and the bouncers don't take too much of a dislike to you. Over on the other side, a review of a Mud gig at the Music Machine. Mud, like Shawaddy Waddy, were one of those kind of clean living pop groups that acquired a number of fans. And it's a good description of the fashions at the time. It says, the fellas, resplendent in their new high-waisters and platforms, prop up the bar, exchanging jokes while the girls in their white t-shirts fight for a place beneath the strobe and practice their Colgate smiles on their frequent visits to the ladies via the bar, of course. You're probably starting to get the feeling that the Record Mirror is a little bit all over the shop. Ramshackle, but do you know what? It's kind of lovable still despite all this. And here is like one of the feature that they ran every week that is a hidden gem of the Record Mirror. And it's all about the disco scene. And it's a feature, weekly feature by James Hamilton. Now, James Hamilton is a dapper looking gentleman with a well-cultivated beard and hairdo who was a DJ himself. And that was arguably the best funk disco club Gulliver's in Mayfair, London. These columns chart the evolution of dance music from the 70s into the 80s and electronica and rave, and are a hidden time capsule and treasure trove. And thankfully, they have just been compiled into a book. Now, as he's a DJ and he has to get feet onto the floor, the Disco Top 50 is itself a mixed bunch, and would feature such classics that would get you dancing, such as Mull of Kintyre or 2468 Motorway by the Tom Robinson Band, and indeed even the band Hey Little Girl are breaking there into the charts. However, if you look through the charts in here, it's where you find some serious deep cuts, some serious disco deep cuts. For instance, Cosmic Lust by Mass Production, or Magic Mandrake, the Star Band. And the charts as he goes through these weeks are full of these absolute gems. As we said though, there's a curious kind of mishmash going on here. So what would go better once you're now into the disco feature? Why, having the second part of the Clash history in a cartoon form underneath. It's very good, but what the hell is it doing there? Because when you turn the page, you get the second half of the disco feature. Again, very, very strange, but very, very lovable. And that concludes this final music paper review of 1977. And we now head into 1978 and what would be an absolute fantastic year of punk as it exploded into a myriad of directions and sounds and styles.
The press darlings, the press darlings, press